Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend the webinar on understanding the basics of ESOPs organized by Hackstrap and C Marketplace. I take great pleasure in introducing the speaker for today's webinar, Mr. Alok Bansal. Alok is the co-founder and director at Policy Bazaar, India's leading online financial services aggregation platform. He did his PhD or MBA from Ann Calcutta during 1999-2001. Alok was interested in speaking about ESOPs as he wants the startups and their employees to make the best use of them. In this webinar, he intends to explain ESOPs as clearly as possible so that businesses can manage this in-house and avoid costly mistakes. I'm also glad to have Company Secretary Ankita Patel and ESOPs advisor Garima Sharma from Vazi, a smart platform for legal, accounting, and compliance services, to help us with any details. Kindly feel free to ask questions during the webinar by raising your hand. You can also post questions using the Q&A Zoom feature. We also have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. We intend to grow its reach as the largest platform for B2B and professional webinars. With this, I welcome Mr. Alok Bansal to start the webinar.
Thanks, Sandeep. Good afternoon, everyone. I can see a few names that I can recognize. So good to be here and getting to talk to you. We were chatting just before the session, and Sandeep did mention there were a lot of people who were registered, and his expectation was 1/3 to convert or attend the webinar. But I think we are almost at what, 75%? But anyways, I have a small presentation, very, very high level. And, although Sandeep did mention why did I want to talk about ESOPs, but, this is just some learnings that we had over last 12, 13 years since we started this company. And one of the things we realized was that ESOP is almost like a one-way street. So, the decisions you take at the start can have a long-term impact on how that scheme will unfold and how you will manage the whole ESOP plan for the company and for the employees. So this is just very anecdotal, just our experience, some learnings that we had, and very, very happy to take on questions as we go through the discussion today. And with Ankita and Garima here, I think they should be able to give more flavor to exactly what are the best practices in the market. So I'll just start a small presentation that I created at a very, very high level. So, as I said, most of the companies, obviously, when they are private or when they are very early stage, think of ESOPs for the staff. So, the way I am thinking of this session is just to have how did we approach the whole ESOP scheme part, some of the basic stuff, who can get covered under the ESOP scheme, how do you execute a ESOP scheme, ESOP trust part, and some of the accounting MIS aspects, which from management perspective also can be something we may not be aware of. I do not want to cover why should we give ESOPs. That's more theoretical and very, very different topic. This is more about execution of how do we do it. So, when we started off in 2008, we didn't have a trust. We didn't even know how to go about doing it. And we had, apart from 3 founders, another 15, 17 people who were very, very early stage employees in the company, few of them from day one. And they all knew that we will accommodate them as part of the ESOP scheme at some point, but how it will happen and when it will happen was never decided. From 2008 to 2012, 13, there were multiple times where employees were actually coming back to us and asking that we don't even have a paper. And we said that since we have already told you that this is the sort of ESOPs you have, you don't have to worry about paper because our word is the commitment. A lot of early stage employees may get comfort, but not everyone. And as we go through this, you'll see that some of the stuff has evolved because of Companies Act change in 2014. But prior to that, we could live with this commitment bit. But the important point is this commitment has to be honored. In our case, since there was no paperwork and a couple of people had left the organization and they were entitled to some ESOPs, we ensured that they got the value of that ESOP even after leaving. In fact, maybe 2 or 3 years after leaving. We managed it very in a complicated way, roundabout way, but still we got them that value. And I think that creates a huge amount of trust in the team. That management is not just doing a lip service; they're actually going to follow through. Another important thing about our approach was salary versus ESOPs. So for senior people, we would typically hire at flat salary or little lower salary than what they were drawing, even though joining a startup at that time was not very glamorous. But we were very clear that people who do not understand the value of what they are creating and the potential gains from ESOPs will not be the right fit for the organization. So a lot of senior people actually joined at flat or low, but that has changed over time. As we grew, we got people to join at market salary with increments, but that also meant the amount of ESOP they could have got also got reduced. So we also had a couple of schemes in between where we said if people are willing to let go of their variable, which is the cash part that company would have spent, we would convert that variable into 3x as ESOPs. So we did a lot of stuff and we used ESOPs to reduce the overall cash burden at the early part of the company. We also, we obviously didn't know what ESOP is and how do we manage these things. So we thought of taking help. I won't take name of who all we approached, but when we approached consultants at that time, because there were not too many people who could have helped, even though they were supposedly working for a startup sort of division within their company, the sort of commercial ask that these consultants or firms had was very high for us. I remember in 2011 or 12, we got quoted some 14 lakh rupees. And from our perspective, that was just too much. We have been a very miserly company from day one. So then we thought, okay, can we do something different? At that time, we had InfoEdge as our investor. And InfoEdge, because it's a corporate, already had a ESOP scheme, ESOP trust. So we asked them for some advice. We also went to a local company secretary and thought of what all we need. So we got a ESOP trust paperwork done and we got it registered. We are based in Gurgaon, so we got it registered in Gurgaon. And the total spend, if I remember right, was 10,000 rupees only. So you can see 14 lakh rupees versus 10,000 rupees at that time, including the registration cost and government cost and everything else. So, there is no right answer here, but I think the real value of management is to do the things which otherwise they will go to consultants for and pay for. Otherwise, why are you there? And in our case, because there were 2, 3 of us founders, there were different people doing different roles. So, somehow we just divided responsibilities and got it done in house. I did mention about 2014 Companies Act. So that was a big change because after 2014, April 2014, we actually got all the paperwork done for past, and since then we have continued to do the paperwork as and when the grants have happened. There is one very, very important condition which was put in at 2014 Companies Act, which was a minimum 1 year vesting. So even if you want to give someone shares it today, which is 28th of May, and potentially suppose you have a strategic sale happening after 4 months, there is no way these shares will get vested, whatever happens, because that minimum 1 year vesting clause has been put into the 2014 Companies Act. There are obviously 4 stages. Most of you will know. There's a grant stage, there's a vesting stage, there's an exercise stage, and then there's a selling stage. These are very important to understand what exactly happens in each of these states. Vesting is linked to the vesting schedule that you create. Exercise can have a lot more flexibility, but there's a tax impact of exercise of shares. So now we'll cover some of this as we go forward in this presentation. Another important point is who is covered. Again, in 2014, this was a small change. Only employees are covered. Employees can be of the main company or subsidiaries, but only employees. No advisors, no consultants, no directors can be covered under ESOPs. They may be given equity separately in different ways, but not as ESOPs. And one very, very important thing for founders on this discussion, there's a very clear demarcation between promoter versus founder. And then there's some rules for startups which came out, which basically said that if you are a promoter and if your company is X year old, you cannot be given ESOP by the board. And they use the word promoter very specifically. So if any of you call yourself promoter, please relook all your submissions to ROC, your SHAs, that whether you are called a promoter or a founder. Sometimes just being called a promoter can create a lot more issue, not only for ESOP, but even at the time of IPO. It's a legal term, like managing director is a legal term, whole-time director is a legal term. Similarly, promoter is a legal term. There is no term called founder anyway. So these are the few basics. Now I'll come to some details of when you look at the actual execution of trust and scheme. Then what are the few things that people should keep in mind? So first of all, we took an approach that we have to be fair to both. So when we are saying that it is an employee facing scheme, we have to also ensure that if by chance we had an exit from a disgruntled employee, then how do we manage that risk? We don't mind people going out on a good term and they make value because of ESOP, but if someone is going on very, very bad term and want to actually harm the company and the promoters, then there has to be a fail-safe within ESOP scheme. So there are two parts to it. One is the trust. So the shares are created in the company and moved to the trust. Now, trust is a legal entity. As far as I know, if you want to do ESOPs, and as ESOPs, not as RSUs or some phantom stock or anything, you will need a trust. If you have a trust, you need to have a trustee. Typically, if you have investors, they will be at least one of the trustees, usually. Otherwise, it can be management team themselves as trustee. Voting rights is again, which is open. The trust may or may not have voting rights, or it may be split in the same ratio as others. But this can become important for two reasons. One, sometimes a lot of rights in your SHA will be linked to voting rights, or even in compliance where you call for a shorter notice EGM and all, those voting rights can play a role. And for regulatory businesses, like we have a regulatory business, sometimes this voting right also will get counted towards control by Indians versus foreigners. And the last part is registration of trust. We got our ESOP trust registered, but it's not compulsory. Having a trust is important, but getting registered and notarized is not a precondition as far as I am aware. Uh, Ankita and Garima can help here specifically if anything have changed from these facts, but this is what I knew of. Now, second part is the ESOP scheme. Within the trust, you can have multiple schemes. Suppose you have a scheme which is 2021 scheme. After 2 years, you have a different thinking and you want to change that scheme. You can create a 2023 scheme. Uh, Within the scheme are the exact mechanics of how everything will happen. So there can be different vesting periods, and you can either write a vesting period as a percentage or number of shares, or you can exactly put the dates and the number of shares vested, all that stuff. One important point here is a lot of companies look at acceleration of vesting in case of liquidation event. So suppose you end up selling your company to someone or you go for IPO, would all the unvested shares get accelerated and get vested on a particular day? We took the approach of acceleration because if there is a strategic sale or IPO and people are able to liquidate, then we wanted them to make money. And some people may get lucky because of that because they just joined 1.5, 2 years back. But in our latest scheme, we have removed this acceleration because now we want people to obviously continue post IPO. But this can be one of the considerations. Second is the exercise period. Now, as soon as you have the vesting, people can exercise. But when they exercise, they need to pay tax. So there are two parts here. One is exercise value, one is tax. So suppose your par value of the share today is 10 rupees, but your fair market value of the ESOP scheme after valuation. Sorry, I missed that one point that ESOP shares have to be valued by a merchant banker every year for audit, but even for at the time of exercise, this merchant banker valuation becomes important. This will be typically will be at a discount to your fair market value of the company because these shares do not have free transferability and they lack the control. So because of this marketability and control aspects, typically there's a discount that the merchant banker will do. But at whatever excise value, suppose your company per share price today is 100 rupees and merchant banker says for the ESOP is 60 rupees. And if the par value is 10 rupees, the 60 minus 10, 50 rupees becomes income. Actually, in this case for ESOP, everything becomes an income. So everything goes into a pecuniary tax. Peculiar tax basically means income tax, which is at the highest slab. And when they are able to sell that share, then this employee pays capital gains tax over and above what they've paid at the base case. Suppose they've excised at 60 rupees and eventually they sell at 150 rupees, then 90 rupees goes as capital gains, depending on public or private, and depending on holding period, can be short-term capital gain or long-term capital gain. But because employee has to pay tax today without having the cash in hand, a lot of people may not want to excise. Early stage companies anyways have that risk. So taking money out of a home to excise sometimes is not feasible. So whenever employees in our company have sold any secondary shares, they've done the excise at the same time, paid the tax, and got the money in hand. But for that, you need to keep the excise period open for very, very long number of years. But that's quite easy. That's not a problem. And as I mentioned, the managing the exit cases becomes very important because there are multiple ways for you to control the rights or the conversion of these shares into these ESOPs into shares by the employees, and you can build those into the ESOP scheme itself. Now, there's one more aspect to ESOP scheme which I have again not put here, which is the SEBI compliant ESOP scheme. See, till the time you are private, there's no issue. But in case any of you go towards getting listed in India, then SEBI has certain requirements that they want in the ESOP scheme, and you will have to go through a proper exercise to make your scheme SEBI compliant at that time. Lastly, the accounting tax, as I said, trust is a separate legal entity. Uh, there's a P&L hit at the holdco level or whichever entity has issued the ESOPs, and it can be charged to the subsidiaries as intercompany charges. Very important from the management and founders perspective to keep two records. One, original allocations as per the MIS or HR, and second is the current holding after accommodating for any share, secondary share sale or purchase. This will help you decide if you have to give more shares in future to the same employees, old employees, all that stuff. We have created secondary opportunities for our employees almost every 18 months. And instead of us deciding that he will be able to sell and this person cannot sell, we have tried to always create a formula based on tenure, amount of number of shares vested, uh, and few other things, so that anyone who falls within that formula is eligible to sell. Others will have to wait for their chance. So these were the few thoughts I had in mind. Happy to take on any questions now. I hope this was useful to people here.
Thank you, Alok. Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Vamsi, please ask the question.
Yeah, Alok, when we are, sorry, I just missed a couple of minutes. Two questions I have. When we are saying promoter, as such, promoter is not a really qualified terminology, right? So why is it treated differently, or why is there any regulatory limitation when you call yourself as a promoter or a
promoter is a qualified term, if I'm not wrong. I do not have that deep finance background to give more color to it, but for ESOP grant, promoter is a qualified term, and for IPO, promoter is definitely a qualified term. So when you look at a lot of companies, especially digital space companies which are looking at going IPO, because of the multiple rounds of funding, the founders are usually in small to mid single digit shareholding, and SEBI requirement of promoter block of 20% becomes an issue.
Oh, that's where
but SEBI definitely says there is a term called promoter. I don't know whether Companies Act also had something like that, but Companies Act ESOP part has a term called promoter.
Yeah. Now I can connect what you're saying. I understand. Now, for a smaller startups who wants to vest some shares so that you motivate employees and get them to be a part of company. I mean, the IPO is still far away, right? IPO is still far away, and we don't want to get into a lot of operational issues of setting up a trust and all these things. what are the other options apart from ESOPs? I know that your topic is ESOPs, but even if you can touch upon whatever you know, what are
Yeah,
the
I don't
other
know much.
options of giving?
I don't know too much about this, Vamsi, on options apart from ESOPs in India, especially because the US has a lot of flexibility, and a lot of other geographies have a lot of flexibility. So there is something called RSUs, restricted stock options. Then
Big one.
stock units, yeah, and then there are phantom stocks where technically you are giving equivalent value. So suppose you want to give someone 10 lakh rupees of ESOPs, instead of that you say you have a deemed ESOPs of 10 lakh rupees, and whatever happens to the value, you can get benefit of that. But actually, you do not own share ever. So that if 10 lakh rupees become 20 lakh rupees, the differential 10 lakh is paid to the employee. A lot of companies also don't give ESOP at the par value through their journey. Because see, a person who is joining on day one is eligible for par value ESOP, but a person who joins after 5 years or 7 years should be granted ESOP at the value at which he joins, so that from there onwards, if there's an increase, they can get benefit. But that becomes very complicated to manage overall. So in our case, we said, okay, we are going to give you X value of ESOPs based on the latest valuation. So if
Correct.
we
And
believe,
then you give it at par value based on the
then we give
number
it
of
a par
shares.
value, but the number of shares become low.
Yeah, yeah. You understand. So Phantom and RSU are not in India, or you are not sure.
I don't know much about that.
So let me take this. I'm
Sure,
Garima
Vinod.
here. Yeah. So Phantom and RSUs and stock appreciation rights very much prevalent in India. RSUs more so now for in the listed space. If you look at most of the companies that go in for an RSU because of RSUs being at par value. So the amount of benefit that gets passed on to any employee is much more, and it also considers that the market fluctuations that happen can be taken care of. So supposing if you were to do a grant at market price and the market price dipped after that, your ESOPs would be valued less. So a par value or an RSU grant at least ensures that even if the market price dips, it still gives you some value. So it's very much prevalent in India. Not that it is not.
And is there any hard ring fencing on it? Certain top conditions, or generally startups of any kind can just give? Like, do we have to go like form a trust or put a
No.
fund somewhere?
So I thought I'll correct a few points which Alok mentioned. Firstly, on directors, they are covered under ESOP. They are allowed to cover unless they are holding more than 10% of the company. So if any director is holding more than 10% of the company, they are not eligible, but directors are allowed. Second was whether trust is needed for doing an ESOP. No, you could have a scheme which is administered by the company themselves. They don't need to have a trust. As in, trust is not like a prerequisite to have. You could have a scheme which is directly administered by the company. Third bit was on the trustees, where he said the management could become trustee. Under the new Companies Act rules, you have regulations under the Companies Act which say that you can have only a specific independent people as trustees. You cannot have key managerial people as trustees. This is more so to prevent, and it's more prevalent in the listed space, to prevent insider trading and holding of stocks in the trusts, which used to happen before 2014, and then SEBI actually went ahead and said, put a ban on ESOP trusts and ESOPs being administered through a trust. And recently, if about in 2015, 16, they lifted it and they put regulations in place to say who's the trustee going to be and how the trust is going to act. So the voting rights and all of that is now regulated. It's not left open to the promoters and directors. It is not considered promoter holding. It is not considered public holding either. So it's like a separate, segment. So in terms of how difficult or how easy it is to set up an ESOP scheme or any other variable instrument for that matter, it is quite simple. If you were to look at it from not doing an ESOP perspective, because your question was specifically for that, you could have an ESOP or a stock appreciation right, which is basically settled in cash, but it is linked to the share price, right? So, for example, if you grow the share price, if you grow the value of the company, then you get a certain percentage of whatever you're growing. Right? So that is possible to do.
Means you have to pay cash at some point of time, which is linked to the
Yeah. So
Foundation.
either see if you don't have a liquidity per se, then you'd want to do something which is cash based, unless you have a cash crunch as well. As in, is something that basically service oriented or service companies usually are cash rich. They would not have gone public, or they will not go public, but then they would have cash to pay out these employees. So that could be a case where you have cash. If you don't, then probably you could look at a longer term and say, okay, fine, probably at the end of 10 years or is where it gets settled.
Yeah, there are a few other questions that are both on the chat and Q&A. So, let's take them quickly. Can the vesting schedule be kept different between employees and key employees? Yes, you can have whatever vesting schedule you want. Till the time the first vesting is not before first year, end of 1 year. But you can have 100% vesting on the first year date itself. You can do whatever you want with vesting, and it can be different for different people.
Yeah, but you can't backdate it, if
Yes,
that's a question,
you
right?
cannot
Yeah.
backdate. In our
You
case, sometimes it has happened that a person has joined. Suppose the way we approach this thing, we say we have a particular vesting schedule, but and we typically want to give letter on 1st of April. Now, if a person joins on 1st of June, obviously I cannot give a letter of 1st of April. So what we do is we say, okay, anyone who joins in the first half of the year, we give them a letter for the next year whenever we do the actual paperwork. But the first vesting will be double vesting. So that takes care of the vesting part, but you cannot backdate. That's not possible. One more question here. Founder is both promoter and director. I think Garima already answered that directors now can get. Promoter, I think Startup India rule or some other rule I read somewhere they said that first 5 years you can get. After 5 years, there were some conditions if you are a promoter. But if you are a founder, then there is no such condition. But I think Garima can add on this one.
Yeah, so they've not defined founders as such, but if you're named in the incorporation document as promoters, even when you've set it up, then you will be covered.
Now, there are a couple of questions around how much to give to early stage employees. Okay. There's no right answer here. See, typically, if you have more than one founder, the division between founders itself is something that can be done in multiple ways. So it can be equal, which some of the companies have done. Like in Flipkart case, we always used to read that Sachin and Benny both have equal. But it can be very different based on experience, based on the role, and based on the early investment that the founders are doing from their own pocket. Similarly, for early stage employees, it can be linked to their role, their salary, uh, seniority, lots and lots of stuff. But typically, if you look at the total universe, you will find that most of the companies will have a ESOP trust ranging between 5 to 15%. It's a quite a wide range, but still, 5 to 15% is the ESOP trust, and you typically would want to give some part of the ESOP trust, but want to retain some in the ESOP trust for future employees as well and for future grants as well. But the good part is, for most of the companies, as you grow and as you take on new investments, investors themselves will ask you to put more into the ESOP trust so that you maintain a particular level. And most of the time, at the time of funding, it is done pre-funding, but it can be both ways. It can be post-funding also. And you'll see this range of 5 to 15% will give you enough for managing the whole ESOP allocation bit. Okay, then ESOP 19 scheme. I create a ESOP 20 scheme. Can I move everyone granted ESOP? No, once you have given a paper, I don't know whether it is possible to change that from 19 to 20 scheme, because first of all, shares which were vested have already been vested. So I don't know why employees will let go of that right. See, one of the ways to execute this, and I'm just thinking, is people to surrender the ESOP to 2019 shares and get new allocation under 2020. but they need to be convinced that why it's beneficial to them. But I don't think you can just move.
And Alok, what about the unvested shares, the granted but unvested shares under 2019?
Once you have granted, the legal paperwork has been done.
Okay.
So I don't really think you can change that unless both sides agree. So basically, if employees agree to let go of those and get new ones, possibly yes.
Hello, this is Saurabh here. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Saurabh, go ahead.
Alok and Garima, two questions basically. First is that in case of an early stage startup, do I need to first necessarily set up pool of shares classified as an ESOP before I can give a letter to anyone? Or no, I can issue some letters of broadly how many shares I'll give it to any employee at a future date and later get it honored when I form a separate pool of ESOP shares.
Saurabh, you need a shareholder approval before you do any of the letters. Unless the shareholders approve,
Okay.
the letter is null and void.
Okay, so shareholders have to approve, but I may not necessarily create a separate, pool of shares to be classified under ESOPs. Or no?
What
Yeah,
will the
ESOP now,
shareholders approve?
there's a difference.
They will approve a pool only, no?
Yeah,
Oh,
I think
okay.
there's one thing called ESOP and one thing called grant. So if you are granting shares directly, then
Okay.
the decision will happen on the same day because you have already given the share. It's not an option you are giving a share.
Okay. Okay.
For option, I think option has to go through an option framework.
So now the related question, Alok, you said that we can possibly the way you went about it was just spend 10,000 rupees and it got whatever it is. But then having all these nuances framed into pool, like you also mentioned later, any disgruntled employee should not be able to harm you, and what should be the exercise period, and when can I give how I don't give a back letter, backdated letter, etc. For framing all of this, do I need to hire someone who will charge me a lot of money, or that also can be done in a?
I think there are a lot of experts now, and obviously with Garima and Ankita on the call, you have a couple of them on the call itself.
Yeah.
When we started at that time, that was not possible. So we had to reach out to Big Fours or some law firm, and they obviously will have their cost structures. But I think we were also a little different on two aspects. One, we had InfoEdge, which actually helped a lot with some of these things. And second, we had a finance team from day one. I don't have pure finance background, but I used to look at overall finance, legal aspects. But I always had a CA and CS in the organization from very early days, and few accounting people. So we will sit collectively and think through different aspects, and we'll go through some of the ESOP schemes available on the net to see what all stuff we will need. But my guess is, if you do not have a dedicated person who's looking at this, take some help. It will be worth it in the long run.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
I agree.
just last question. Sorry, if so if you said that the range can be between 5 to 15%. So to begin with, is it advisable that even when I have not gone for an institutional fund at this stage itself, shall I mark out, or when I have identified some key hires to be done, so let's say mark out 5% of the entire share pool as ESOPs, and then later keep adding as and when required, and possibly go up to 15 if required,
Yeah,
or not go up to
that's a good practice. That will be a very good practice. It will give confidence to the employees also, and you will also have very clear idea about how much vested, unvested, non-grant stock you already have. So I would say even if you do not have an institutional investor yet, carve out something, whether it's 2%, 5%. There's no right answer there, obviously.
right,
When institutional investors are there, they will anyways force you to create something.
right.
But always a good idea to have a clear allocation.
Hello.
Thanks, Alok. Thanks, Garima. Yeah.
Hi, Alok and Garima. This is Sumit here. Can I ask a couple of questions?
Sumit, go ahead.
Yes. So, Alok, my first question is regarding valuation. So, do we need to get a valuation report done at the time we are issuing letters to employees, or do we need to do it when they are
I mean, exercising the shares.
Let me take that, Alok.
Sure.
On at both times, at the time when you're doing a grant, you need a registered valuer. You don't need a merchant banker. At the time when you're actually exercising the options, you need a merchant banker for the requisite calculation.
So, because I'll tell you, we had issued letters around a year ago, and at that time, under a Startup India certificate or something, our company secretary and chartered accountant both are of the view that we don't need to do a valuation right now because we were issuing the letters at face value. So they said whenever your employee exercises it it is at that time you will need it by a registered merchant
No,
bank.
no, you need to also account for it, right? So
You need to do accounting, yeah, Sumit.
for
So you're
accounting, it's a little complicated accounting. Actually, in India is especially quite a complicated accounting for ESOPs. Even though you may believe that you are giving, say, 10% for 10 years, or 20 for 5 years, or 10, 20, 30, 40 for 4 years, whatever way you want to create your scheme,
Mhm.
bulk of the value has to be accounted in P&L in the first year because of the way it's created, the accounting rules are created. And your auditor may or may not get comfort from the valuation report. So auditor can still have a view that this valuation report I'm not going to go with, but if it's through a merchant banker, category 1 merchant banker specifically, you can still fight back with the auditor. It becomes very tricky because for excise, eventually even the income tax can come after that employee or company. So you have to be very, very careful that how do you defend a particular valuation report.
And is there a, I mean, suppose I have a report. So we did a rights issue before we had issued those letters for employees. So they were of the view that you've taken a report for this rights issue which is less than X months old. So that should be sufficient enough.
Valuation report is valid for 6 months.
Okay.
But again, valuation report will have two parts. One will be for the company fair market value. One will be for the ESOP fair market value. And so
Okay.
ESOP one will be typically at a discount.
Okay.
So
Okay.
and that fair market value in your case, because it was a very small value at that time, 10 rupees versus 10 rupees only.
Yes.
So the impact may not be much. But for a lot of companies, if you don't issue a bonus share, your per share value keeps on increasing. So I'll give you our own example because this is public data. We did some split of share last year.
Mhm.
Till the time we did the split of share, our per share price went to almost like 9.5 lakh rupees.
Okay. Okay.
And then it becomes very tricky because if you want to give 15 lakh rupees in stocks, how do you do that? Because even if you give 2 shares, that is more than 15, first of all. And secondly, how do you then vest it? So I had to do split and then split and bonus also have their own complications.
Understood. Understood. And my one more question. Actually, two more questions. One is you said you when you were mentioning schemes, you were mentioning years along with the scheme, 2019 and 20. So is it possible for me? So I had a hire around a year and a half ago whom had given the same scheme document, and I have the hire around 2 months ago whom I have given the same scheme document.
Your scheme can continue for multiple years. In our case, like we have only 2 schemes. One is 2014 scheme, which is continuing till now. And then last year, at some point, we created another scheme. And then we had unallocated shares in the old scheme, which we transferred to the new scheme because those were unallocated through a proper paperwork.
Got it. Got it. And my last question, Alok and Garima, sorry for persisting. My last question is: your presentation mentioned about acceleration in case of say an exit event or an IPO event. Now, in that case, I'm still bound by that ROC requirement or Companies Act requirement of a vesting period of 12 months, right?
Minimum.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
So
you are.
You cannot have
that I cannot accelerate.
You cannot accelerate less than 1 year, but anything beyond 1 year will get accelerated to the first year date.
Understood. Understood. Got it. Got it. I think that is very helpful, Alok and Garima. Thank you so much.
So, Garima, one answer you have mentioned that directors can buy back ESOPs from employees into their personal holding. That is applicable for directors holding more than 10% of shares already. That they are
Yeah,
also
so anybody can buy back, right? Even if the company were to buy back, anybody can buy back so long as you have a buyer. But then,
okay.
At what value, at what terms is something that you have to think through.
Got it. One question which I mentioned was more around minimum number of shares to be exercised, and
No,
and
there
this
isn't any.
there is so
Limited to the number of options you're getting, right? So if it is a 1:1, one option for one chair, then it's limited to the
and
number of
in
options
the
that you got.
scheme we can purposefully put if we want a minimum cap to it, right?
Yeah, you could. Usually, what happens in listed entities is they don't. They also put a cap on when can you exercise, because they cannot have being bigger setups. They cannot have board meetings on and off. So they would say,
Right.
okay, any exercises in 1 month, we will collate it together, put it together, and do it in the beginning of the next month, something of that sort. So those
Yeah,
small
you know,
policies you can build for yourself.
that is for every exercise there is a board meeting procedure.
Okay.
So that's the only painful thing. So typically, if a person is in the company and they are not selling, you will find that they are not exercising because of the tax part. If they are leaving and they need to exercise, then you will have to go through the process. And if by chance you are getting any liquidation done for the employees, secondary transactions and all, then also obviously employees will get the whole exercise bit. And there is a record date. The board meeting becomes basically the record date on which the exercise happens, because you may give the check on, say, today, which is 28th of May. The actual meeting may be called for, say, 2nd of June, and the check encashment may happen on 5th of June. When you are looking at your long-term versus short-term capital gains or 1 year exercise period, and some stuff related to IPO and all, the date of the board meeting is the date when the company will take it on record that you have now become a shareholder. Option holder is never on the cap table, but shareholder is on the cap table.
Got it. The couple of questions actually, Alok, the reason I was asking this was actually we got through the journey of a bad experience uh, where we had a disgruntled employee with some vested ESOPs, and so we had no clause of minimum shares to exercise, and also not any period defined. So he was holding some 7-8 ESOPs. What he did was every 20 days he would send that I want to exercise one ESOP of mine. So that was kind of a 6-month journey we went through.
So typically, see, there are two parts. One is, how do you want to look at the exit employees? Like in this case, you had a disgruntled employee, right?
Right.
You can give them a particular time frame in the scheme itself. That okay, you have 5 days, 10 days, 2 months, 6 months, 1 year, within which you have to inform us whether you are going to exercise or not exercise.
Right.
Once a person informs you that they are exercising, then unofficially you'll have to check with them whether they have the cash to exercise, to pay the tax and all that stuff. Some of them may want to pay from their own pocket. Some of them may say, no, why don't you help me? And you figure out if you have someone who wants to buy that, whether it's employee, director, external person. But we'll have to figure out and try and help them if they cannot manage on their own, if it's a decent employee exit. In case of disgruntled, you can also put conditions that company will force them to sell it back to the company once they have left, if company so wishes, and at a particular value. So suppose you put in that company will force the employee to sell it back to the organization at 10% of the value.
Right.
In that case, the tax is 30% and the sale price is 10%. Obviously, no one will accept.
Right.
But we'll have to look at the legal language, how to create these things and what do they mean. But yes, there are different ways those provisions can be created. And once you can also even create things like that at the time of exercise, you want to also have a power of attorney. You're otherwise going to each and every employee for every signature or every approval can become very painful.
Right.
So, a lot of stuff can be done.
Alok, what are the ways in which a disgruntled employee can hurt, with ESOPs can hurt the company? So broadly, and how to mitigate that? I mean, I know there can be a
Typically,
lot
they
of
have the minority rights. So, if they have the minority rights,
okay,
they can also force some information rights. They may be able to also create issues. See, in India, the rules keep on changing. So, in between, there was a rule that if you want to call for a shorter notice EGM, and again, I think Ankita and Garima may be able to help me here, but as far as I remember, their rule was that 95% of the shareholding has to give okay to call for a shorter notice EGM. Now, if you have large shareholders, then 95% is not a problem. In between, that changed to 95% of shareholders will have to give okay. Now, if you have ex-employees who you are not in touch with and who cannot be tracked, and if they are more than 5% of the shareholders or your cap table, you cannot even call for a shorter notice EGM. And sometimes, those are required. It got changed subsequently to 95% shareholding from shareholders. But, a lot of times you need their signatures on certain things and they may just not sign. In between, I'll give an example. Practically, we had to get, when this 95% shareholder thing happened, we had to get signatures from lots and lots of ex-employees who were shareholders. And we were good relations with them. But practically, one of them was in Ladakh at that time. And we had to request that person that go to your hotel, take this printout, sign and send it back. Two people were in the US. They had moved to US. They had taken a job there. But, it can become very painful because you have so many number of shareholders and the procedures keep on changing in India.
So Alok, usually the scheme documents, nowadays would have clauses which talk about termination for cause, abandonment,
That's what I'm saying.
those
You
kind
can
of things.
take out of
So
that
probably you can, cover them there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Alok and Garima, this Sumit here again. In our scheme, what we've done is, in case an employee leaves us, so what we've done is that if he or she has any vested shares after leaving, they have the right to exercise it only till 18 months after that. If they don't exercise those vested shares, then they lapse. So, is that legal or?
It is. Yes, very
yes.
much. You're giving them a time frame. It is legal.
Yes. So
What I'm saying
that is
is
what we
just saying that
had used as a protection that after 18 months, because obviously there is, whenever you exercise, there is that tax incidence on you, plus there's an outflow, and you might not know when you get liquidity on this share, right? So that ways we had used it as a protection that.
So 18 months is too long, Sumit, for a person who's leaving. There are companies, and a general trend, if I were to tell you, is about 2 months, or probably the last day of work.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could cut it down to that much as well and say, so if you resign today and you have a 2-month notice period, within the notice period, exercise your options or else let them go. Even that is option.
You can always create mechanisms to help employees where you want to help. Suppose it's 2 months and you forget about it, employee forget about it, and they come back to you after 4 months. So if you want to help, you can always ask them to give you a physical letter dated 2 months back saying, I want to request for 2 months extension, which company can say, okay. So,
Understood.
You can always help people if you want to help, but you need to define something which is fair to both.
Understood.
Hello, Gariman, a couple of questions from my end. In case of the shares which are like duly exercised, whether by a current employee or ex-employee, and the company goes for an IPO, how do these employees get of liquidity in the IPO by selling to the secondary? Because I would assume in case they are not part of the secondary, then those shares are locked for a year, right?
Oh, so ESOP shares are never locked in till the time they are held by the person who was granted the ESOPs. If they are sold to someone or transferred to their family or someone else, they are under lock-in. The only rule is, actually there are 2 rules. From the exercise date to the DIP filing date, the gap has to be 1 year. Otherwise, you cannot give in OFS, which is the secondary transaction time of IPO day. But you can still sell day after IPO because there is no lock-in. The only restriction from SEBI is for the OFS specifically. But even 1 day after IPO, you can sell all the ESOP shares till the time they are held by the person who was granted the ESOPs.
And to be part of the OFS, like assuming that 1 year criteria is satisfied, can anyone just come and tell the company that I want to sell part of my shares in the ESOP, or the company still have a discretion?
It doesn't need to, because this is a procedure which is defined by SEBI. Every company will have to go to each and every shareholder and ask, do you want to sell or not sell? So it's a responsibility of the company to ask. If they do not ask, they can actually be sued. That why didn't you ask? So they have to formally get an answer from you if you want to sell or not sell. And typically, again, banks and lawyers will insist that if it's an individual or family office who is selling, all these shares go into escrow. Because the problem is, if you say I want to sell and if you afterwards say I don't want to sell now,
Yes.
or you sell between the RHP and listing day to someone else, that becomes a SEBI issue for the company. So typically
Correct.
these shares will be put into escrow.
Understood. Understood. So this consent or this checking has to happen at the pre-DRHP stage, right? Because the DRHP will pretty much define who are the
Yes,
selling
pre
shareholders.
DRHP, company will send out a proper first mail. Typically, I mean, there are two things. One is getting the answer. Second is getting the data, and there's a docket that needs to be filled up by all the selling shareholders. So, but it is a company's responsibility and banks and lawyers' responsibility to get this answer.
Understood. Understood. Couple of more questions. At any point in time, you can have only one ESOP policy in place, like say 2014, and
No,
then
no, no, no.
2000,
You can have multiple. You can have multiple parallel
multiple
policies.
campus.
Not
Okay.
a problem.
And then there was some discussion around, employees wanting to switch from one to another ESOP policy. I couldn't understand that. What's the incentive for if I have a
So
2014
that was a
policy?
specific question asked by someone that can we move employees from one to another on our own? But that was a very specific question asked by someone.
Understood. But from a practical perspective, is there anything, say, more incentivized from a company or an employee perspective to switch those policies?
No, no. See, policies are totally in your control. You decide what policy you want. And if you have given a paper already, then on your own you cannot change because there are two sides to the paperwork. So if employee agrees and they are letting go of their rights under the old one, it's okay to move them to new one. But you just cannot do it on your own. That's all.
Understood.
And Alok and Garima, in what scenarios can so because somebody was telling me that ESOPs, employees can sell their ESOPs, not transfer, sell their ESOPs to any external investor. Is that possible, or
Not
under
ESOP,
which
not
circumstances
ESOP.
is that possible?
They'll have to exercise, convert into shares, and then sell. But again, that can be controlled through scheme and through articles in some form. Till the time you're private.
Okay. But
See, the employee by himself will not know that you're getting an investor, right? Unless you tell them.
no. So somebody was telling me that there are now firms who reach out to employees and say, you can, if you have ESOPs, we can, buy out your ESOPs, etc.
I think those are more for vested and exercise shares.
No, so this was in the context that apparently there are certain investors who are on lookout for the companies which are about to go to IPO, right, and who know they will do well in IPO, whatever, right, and then they reach out to the employees who have an ESOP and
Yeah,
something
that's
like
quite
that.
common. That's quite common. These brokers and wealth managers have become a nuisance for everyone these days, actually, if you ask me. But yes, it's very, very common. The only thing is, see, the transaction has to be recorded by company. And if
Okay.
the company doesn't record it in their share transfer register, technically the transaction cannot, be called as closed. Now, if you have a demat share, the share transfer may happen without company knowing about it. But still, company will have to bless the transaction at some point. So, if company doesn't bless the transaction, eventually it becomes an open transaction where the shares have changed hands, the money has changed hands, but company is not recognizing it. I don't know what to do.
So
But
it has to be at the share level, Alok, not at the ESOP level.
No, can't be at ESOP level. ESOP cannot be changed. ESOP is an option given to a particular person who has to be, employee or whatever.
Yep. Okay.
I think we can stop the webinar at this point. Thank you so much, Alok. Thank you, Garima. Thank you, Ankita.
Thanks. Thank you, Sandeep.
We
Thank
really
you,
like.
all of you. Thanks, Alok.
Yeah.
Very, very
Thank-
helpful. Very helpful. Thank you, Alok.